Week 8 is officially under wraps, and today I got you guys covered with my top 10 waiver pickups entering Week 9 of fantasy football. Again, it is crunch time. It's time to get active on the waiver wire. We are in the closing portion of our fantasy football regular seasons. Before we get into the top 10, though, we go through the should-be roster tier. That tier consists of Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Warren, Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings, Rico Dowdle, Josh Downs, and Jalen McMillan. For Tolbert, he's the clear wide receiver 2 on the Cowboys moving forward. He should be rostered, especially in your deeper league PPR leagues. Same thing goes with Jalen Warren. Big time performance on Monday Night Football. Looked good, looked efficient, looked like that same dynamic that we expected coming into the year. Unfortunately, in the early portion, Warren was suffering from that hamstring injury. He's fully healthy. He needs to be rostered going forward. Same thing with the Niners receivers, Ricky Pearsall and Jawan Jennings. I do slightly prefer Ricky Pearsall, but I do think Jawan Jennings, based off what we saw earlier in the season, does have upside in this offense. Rico Dowdle of the Dallas Cowboys. Again, I don't expect him to be available on your wire, but maybe somebody got mad. He didn't play on Sunday night. They rage dropped him, and you can go and pick up Rico Dowdle. I do think he is the most talented, the most explosive Dallas Cowboys running back, and based off what we saw from Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook, I think he could potentially even have a bigger workload moving forward, assuming he is fully recovered from that sickness that he had on Sunday Night Football. Josh Downs and Jalen McMillan, same thing. Josh Downs, again, I fully don't expect him to be available in your league. Had another monstrous performance this past week, but if he is available, he should be rostered. Same thing with McMillan, playing that Godwin role in this Tampa Bay offense. He needs to be rostered. He had 7 targets in his first game without Evans and Godwin on the field. Based off the involvement we saw from him in Tampa Bay, he should be rostered in every deeper league PPR league like Tolbert. Now we move on to the official top 10 list, headlined this week by Cedric Tillman of the Cleveland Browns, a guy I'd be willing to get aggressive for on my waiver wire. We're talking 30 to 50% is the recommended fab I have for him, but if you do have to go further, I would be willing to bid even more than 50%. And the reason why is that he is the big-bodied X-wide receiver for what could be a potentially thriving Cleveland Browns offense moving forward. 11 targets last week, 9 targets this week. As we know, like I said, Jameis loves his big-bodied X-wide receivers. See Mike Evans when he was in Tampa Bay. And Tillman looks like he's going to be a staple of this Browns offensive approach moving forward. Again, I think at this current point, he has wide receiver 3, top 40 wide receiver level appeal, but he has upside to even be higher moving forward. Again, he's a young player. He's finally developing, and I do think with what Jameis Winston brought to this offense, we could be seeing a ton of passing production, mostly from Cedric Tillman, the 6'3", 213-pound body on the outside. Number 2 for me is Xavier Legette of the Carolina Panthers, rostered in 37% of sleeper leagues, a guy I'd be willing to bid 10 to 20% of my fab on at this current point. Bryce Young was starting in this game, but Legette now has 3 of his last 5 games with over 11 PPR points, and Deontay Johnson is reportedly on the trade block. Again, we will talk about another Carolina Panthers wide receiver in a second, but I do prefer Xavier Legette as being the main pickup if he is available in your league. Again, first-round pick, a guy that I was very high on in the pre-draft cycle. He was a top 8 graded wide receiver for me. I think Xavier Legette is a very talented player. The thing with Legette, again, if you need immediate points, obviously Tillman is going to be more alluring for your lineup, which is why he comes in at number 1 for me. But if we're talking pure upside, I mean, we're looking at the size, the speed, the at-the-catch point ability that Legette brings. If you're in an advantageous position, if you're 5-3, 6-2, 7-1, and you want to get some upside for the cheap right now, Legette, I do think, has a wide receiver 2-level ceiling, especially if Deontay Johnson were to get dealt. Next up at 3 is Ray Davis of the Buffalo Bills, and he was one I was very shocked to see the ownership percentages on. He's currently only rostered in 30% of sleeper leagues, and he's a guy I'd be willing to bid if he is available in your league 10 to 20% of my fab on. Again, another case where if you need immediate points, maybe Ray Davis isn't your best interest, but I do think he has the potential to win leagues if James Cook were to miss any time moving forward. At the very minimum, I think he has to be a high priority handcuff up there with the Tyler Algiers, Braylon Allens of the world. And of course, like I said, we saw in week 6 what this backfield would look like if James Cook were to miss. Ray Davis in that game, 18.2 PPR points, top 12 overall running back finish. Honestly, it's just an implied play. Like, again, if you're in an advantageous position where you can afford not to take points now, Ray Davis has the ceiling where if James Cook missed a 3-week stretch in the fantasy football playoffs, Ray Davis may very well get you the crown. Next up at 4, and more of an immediate point play, but guy that could have potential season-long stability, we have Parker Washington of the Jacksonville Jaguars, 0% roster in your sleeper leagues, and I'd be willing to bid 10 to 20% of my fab on. Again, a little uncertain right now with what the exact situation is of Brian Thomas's injury. It was initially reported 2 to 4 weeks, but now it's sounding like he may potentially be able to play this week. Regardless, though, the Jacksonville Jaguars' top 3 wide receivers all went down, and including the big one, Christian Kirk, being ruled out for the year with a broken collarbone. Plug in Parker Washington. I thought coming out of Penn State, he was a, tough, middle of the field wide receiver, similar to a guy like Jalen McMillan, who we talked about last week. Do I think Parker Washington is the most dynamic wide receiver in the NFL? Absolutely not. However, what I do think he can do, play that middle of the field role, play that tough yards after catch slot role like Christian Kirk is leaving behind in this offense, and Parker Washington can absolutely do that. So again, if you're in a wide receiver pinch, even if you need a play to just put into your lineup this week, I think Parker Washington, if he is playing that Christian Kirk role, will have a big time volume usage in this offense. Number 5 for me, and I alluded to it at the top, but I mentioned his teammate with Xavier Legette. I also really love my boy Jalen Coker of the Carolina Panthers. Undrafted free agent, but if you guys were following in the Dynasty offseason, myself and Corey love Jalen Coker. Again, very small school, was a raw prospect coming in, but he's got the requisite size, the requisite speed, and the requisite outside ability to be an NFL caliber wide receiver. And we've seen that already in his rookie season. He's coming off a big week this past week. And we do know, like I mentioned with Legette, that Deontay Johnson has been floated as a trade candidate for the Carolina Panthers. I think if they do trade Deontay Johnson, Jalen Coker would be the biggest beneficiary. We know Legette is going to be that yards after catch physical wide receiver. I also think Coker is a big time complement to Legette. I think he can play that true X role, also bring size to the table, and we know he is very good at the catch point. So with Coker, again, you shouldn't have to spend too much on him, but I do think he has a ton of upside moving forward, especially when Deontay Johnson is officially traded. Number 6 pickup for me, and another implied play similar to Ray Davis, I have Keaton Mitchell of the Baltimore Ravens. 10 to 20% I would be willing to bid. He is currently rostered in 11% of sleeper leagues. And really, this is just a play on a very efficient player and what we expect to be a top 5 level offense moving forward. 8.4 yards per carry, 32% missed tackles force rate. Mitchell played extremely well in limited spurts last year. Now, obviously, the big elephant in the room is that he suffered that gruesome ACL tear, compound tear last year against the Jacksonville Jaguars late in the season. However, he was activated from the PUP. His practice window was activated, and I do expect Keaton Mitchell to be healthy moving forward. Again, big caveat, very much an implied play. We know Derrick Henry is still in the backfield. Derrick Henry, he's old, a lot of touches under his belt. There is a possibility that if Derrick Henry were to go down, Keaton Mitchell can win you your fantasy football leagues. Again, you don't have to spend too much on him because obviously he has not played a game this year. But with that being said, I do think he needs to be rostered given the fact that he does have league-breaking upside. Like I said, based off that efficiency and based off the scoring prowess of this Ravens offense. Moving on to 7, we have Elijah Moore. And if you guys were following us in the Dynasty offseason back in 2021, you will know that we've been extremely high on Elijah Moore for a while. And in his last 2 games, he has been extremely involved for this Browns offense. He has that, PPR scam, Wan'Dale Robinson type of upside where he can be a hyper short area target on this Browns offense that we have seen their intentions with Winston want to throw the football. Again, I prefer Tillman straight up. I think he's got higher upside given the size, given the target earning ability at the X wide receiver position. Will play in 2 wide receiver sets. But if you do need a PPR scam wide receiver 40-ish level projection to put into your flex spot, I really do like Elijah Moore in this offense. 30% target share this past week. And like I said, it's bye weeks, it's injury season. You need someone to put in your lineup, and I think Elijah Moore will be able to deliver based off the involvement we've seen. Number 8, and the only quarterback on this list, but I do have to give him his flowers, we have Bo Nix of the Denver Broncos. He's rostered in 35% of sleeper leagues, and a guy I'd be willing where if you're in a quarterback pinch, maybe you picked up Drake May and he ended up suffering a concussion, and you need to throw someone in your lineup this week. I really do love Bo Nix. He's put together quite the stretch in the Broncos' last 6 games, and he is currently a top 12 quarterback in fantasy football points per game. He's progressed as a passer, has been a big-time contributor on the ground as well. When you look at his season overall, 5 of his 8 games, he's had over 25 rushing yards, and 3 of those games, he's had over 45 rushing yards. We've seen him be a big-time dual-threat quarterback. We know what Bo Nix and Sean Payton want to do on the offense. They fit like a glove in terms of fit, and the Broncos have quietly been a very good football team in the last few weeks. So with Bo Nix, got to give him his flowers. Again, you have a bye week to your quarterback. You have an injury like Drake May to your quarterback. I think Bo Nix should be rostered in every league based off the upside he's shown. Number 9 is John Metchie of the Houston Texans, rostered in 0% of sleeper leagues, and I'd be willing to bid 0 to 5% of my fab on. And this is more of a sneaky play because obviously he didn't have a big-time stat line nor a big-time usage rate in this game. However, I do love the upside of Metchie potentially filling that slot wide receiver receiver role if Diggs is officially ruled out with the ACL injury. It looked like he suffered on Sunday. With John Metchie, again, limited snaps in this game, but when he was on the field, he had a 44% targets per route run rate. And again, out of the ancillary wide receivers of the Texans, we know Dell's going to be an outside wide receiver. Obviously, when Nico Collins comes back, he will be that team's X wide receiver. Out of the Xavier Hutchinson, Robert Woods, John Metchie, I think John Metchie has the highest upside to playing that slot wide receiver position for this team. Again, not somebody I'm willing to throw him to my lineup this week because obviously the snap rate was low. However, I do think given his skill set, given his toughness over the middle of the field, if they were to trust him in that slot wide receiver role, he could be very productive, hence why I'd be willing to get him for the cheap right now. And the same applies to Michael Wilson. Again, I don't think he has quite the upside of Metchie, knowing the offense of the Texans, knowing the targets that Metchie has earned in the limited snaps he's played. But I do think if you are in a pinch, again, deeper league PPR leagues only, if you're in a 10-team shallow lineup or 8-team shallow lineup, maybe a guy like Michael Wilson isn't appealing to you. But I'm telling you right now, if you're in a 12-team deeper lineup league, 2 or 3 flexes, a guy like Michael Wilson will help you a lot on the waiver wire. Again, not somebody I'm willing to overbid on. He may go for a little bit more than my liking based off the big game he's had this week. But if he's available for 0 to 5% of your fab, again, you kind of know what you're going to get. He's a wide receiver 4 some weeks, wide receiver 5 to 6 on others. But like I said, if you are in a pinch, you lost some injuries, you are dealing with bye weeks, you could go a lot worse than a guy like Michael Wilson off the waiver wire. Again, not the greatest group of waivers overall this week, but guys that can contribute into your lineup in a pinch if you need to. Again, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you leave a like down below. If you want access to all of our rankings moving forward, there's one of 2 ways you can get them right now. First way, Underdog Fantasy. If you guys use promo code FSE on sign up and first deposit, play at least 1 game on the site, you'll have access to our weekly rankings manifesto moving forward. And the other way is by going over to flockfantasy.com. If you guys use promo code FSE, you'll get 30% off any site-wide package, as well as a 7-day free trial on the site. But with that being said, peace out. Good luck on your waivers. Let's get busy.